Welcome to WebStarBus. What is callback hell in JavaScript? Should we not use callbacks? How to use callbacks properly in JavaScript? In this video, we will look into that. But before that, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because I am bringing similar content on this topic. Okay, first let me give you an example of simple callback in JavaScript. In this example, ask is a callback function. It is being passed as argument to main function, this function. It will be executed after the main function completes its job. This is output from main function, and this is output from callback function. This is why it is callback function. Callback function is fine. Too many nested callback functions are not good. They make callback hell. So what is callback hell? Let me give you an example. Here we define a function called step1 that takes two parameters, value and callback. Within the function, we called a setTimeout method, which sets a delay of 1 second before executing some code. The function passed to the setTimeout will log a message to the console that includes the value of the value parameter. And then it calls the callback function with a new value that is 1 greater than the value passed in as the value parameter. Here we simulated an asynchronous operation that takes some time to complete. In this case, waiting 1 second with the setTimeout, and then returns a result to the caller via the callback function. The caller can then use the result returned by step 1 to perform additional processing or call other functions as needed. Similarly, here is similar function with a different name and another function with similar behavior. We have three functions that simulate some asynchronous operations. And then we have start function. The start function calls these functions one after the other, passing the result of each operation to the next one using callbacks. The nested callbacks make the code harder to read and understand, especially as the number of steps increases. This can make it difficult to reason about the behavior of the code and to debug it if there are errors. This is exactly what is called callback hell. Callback hell is a situation in asynchronous programming where the use of multiple nested callbacks creates complex and hard to read code. Code will work and it will be asynchronous or non-blocking, but it will be hard to read and hard to maintain. The nested callbacks make the code harder to read and understand, harder to maintain, and more prone to bugs. To avoid callback hell, we can use other techniques such as promises or async await syntax. If we use promises for this code, then it will be something like this. Let's copy this code. Remove callback from here. Before setTimeout, return new promise that takes two parameters, resolve and reject. And it will close here. And here instead of callback, it will be resolve. Same for this step 2 and step 3. And then the start function will be like this. In this code, each of the three functions returns a new promise object that represents an asynchronous operation. The start function changes these promises using the .then method, which allows the next promise to be executed when the previous one is resolved. The use of promises makes the code more readable and easier to understand than the nested callbacks. Additionally, the use of the catch method allows us to handle errors that may occur during the execution of the promises. If we even go further and refactor the code to use async await, code will be slightly changed. Let's copy this code. And there will be no change for these three functions. step 1, step 2, and step 3. But the start function will change like this. Async function start. Try catch, and here is await. The start function is defined as async, which allows us to use the await keyword. Await keyword is to wait for each promise to resolve before proceeding to the next step. The try catch block is used to handle any errors that may occur during the execution of the promises. The await keyword is used to wait for the step 1 function to resolve and then resulting values passed as an argument to the step 2 function. The same pattern is repeated for the step 3 function. And finally, the result is logged to the console here. Async await is a relatively new feature in JavaScript. I will not go into details on their support. You can visit Can I Use and check that yourself. Promises, async, await. These are supported for modern browsers. Older browsers are being perished anyways. Can you use older software these days? No, right? Every software forces you to upgrade, otherwise it does not work. So that conversation is not of importance. Use latest features available for modern web browsers. Promises and async await can be used together in same project, like these are being used in this example. I will go further and show you one more thing. In this function that is using promise, you can add async await as well. Async function, return await new promise. It will work as well. So use promises or async await instead of simple callbacks. It will make your code asynchronous and a little bit more readable and easy to debug. Once more, if I confused you with multiple functions, here are clean examples of JavaScript promises and async await separately. This is an example of using promises in JavaScript to fetch data from an API, a practical use case. Fetch data function returns a promise that makes a network request to the JSON placeholder API to fetch a to-do item with an ID 1. If the response is successful, the data is parsed from JSON and resolved. Otherwise, an error message is displayed. The promise returned by fetch data is then consumed using .then to handle the resolved data and catch method to catch errors. This is a function call. If the promise is resolved, the fetched data is logged to the console. If the promise is rejected, the error message is logged to the console. If we look at its async await based implementation, it is like this. The fetch data function is defined as async function, which allows us to use await to handle promises in a more concise way. Inside this function, we use try catch blocks to handle errors. First, we await the response from the API endpoint. This is the API endpoint, and then we check if the response is successful. If it is not, we throw an error. If the response is successful, we await the JSON data and return it. And here, we defined an immediately invoked async function to consume the promise returned by fetch data using await. If the promise is resolved, the fetched data is logged to the console. If the promise is rejected, the error message is logged to the console. This code can be simplified further. We use this console here instead of return data and this error here. Now here we just need this function call. Also, you can use console.error instead of throw new error. Throw new error just halts the code execution. Console log does not halt code execution. Now this is much clean. I will leave it here, but this is callback, callback hell, promises, and async await. I would say it is a lot cleaner to use async and await. In my opinion, async await wins. Let me know your thoughts. Okay, I hope it helped. Like, share, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.